All right, I think we are probably good to get started. Oliver, if you want to kick us off.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kevin. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenue, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on the IJC's 2025 Protection of the Waters of the Great Lakes report. Many of you participated in our first webinar 6 months ago when we presented the draft report and invited public comment. Since then, the Commission has reviewed the feedback received and has now released the final report. In today's session, we will discuss the final version and the next steps in our work. I'd like to begin by informing you that this webinar will be recorded for administrative purposes and will be posted to the IJC's website within a few days. I would also like to note that this webinar will be conducted in English. However, we recognize that English and French are the official languages of Canada, and we encourage you to participate in the official language of your choice. If you participate in French, I will do my best to translate your contribution into English for everyone's benefit. J'aimerais également vous informer que ce webinaire se tiendra en anglais. Cependant, nous reconnaissons que l'anglais et le français sont les langues officielles du Canada et nous vous encourageons à participer dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Si vous participez en français, je ferai de mon mieux pour traduire votre contribution en anglais pour le bénéfice de tous. My name is Oliver Dumville, and I'm a senior advisor with the Canadian section of the IJC. We are joined today by U.S. Co-Chair and Commissioner Jerry Acker, as well as Commissioner appointed by Canada, Sue Chiblo. We are also joined by Michael Lada, Senior Physical Scientist with the IJC's U.S. section, as well as Murray Clayman and Dave Dempsey, who authored the draft report on which this final version is based. And thank you as well to Kevin Bunch of the IJC's U.S. section, who is sharing his screen today. I'd like to briefly introduce Murray and Dave, whose work provided the foundation for the Commission's final recommendations. Murray Clayman is an affiliate professor at McGill University, contributing to the Integrated Water Resources Management Master's Program and teaching a graduate level course on water, society, law, and policy. He completed his PhD in civil engineering at Imperial College London as an Athlone Fellow and co-edited a comprehensive volume on the first century of the IJC. Dave Dempsey has worked on Great Lakes and environmental issues for more than 4 decades. He has served as an environmental advisor to former Michigan Governor James Blanchard and as a member of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. He is the author or co-author of 8 books, several focused on the Great Lakes, and holds degrees from Western Michigan University and Michigan State University. I would now like to take a moment to acknowledge that the Great Lakes watershed is the ancestral and ongoing homeland of numerous Indigenous nations. These nations have cared for these waters, lands, and ecosystems since time immemorial, guided by deep knowledge, spiritual connection, and enduring relationships. Today, the Great Lakes continue to sustain the livelihoods, cultures, and identities of Indigenous peoples on both sides of the Canada-US border. We honor their rights, responsibilities, and treaty relationships, and we recognize that our work takes place within the context of shared stewardship. We remain committed to listening to, learning from, and working in respectful partnership with the First Nations, tribal nations, and Métis communities whose territories encompass the Great Lakes Basin. I invite each of you to take a moment to reflect on the traditional territory you are situated on, and to consider the enduring presence and knowledge of the Indigenous peoples who continue to live in relationship with those lands and waters. I will review our agenda in just a moment, but before I do so, I will turn it over to Commissioners Acker and Chiblo, who kindly offered to provide opening remarks. And Commissioner Acker, you may begin.
Merci, Oliver. Bienvenue à tous. The release of the 2025 Protection of the Waters of the Great Lakes report is an important moment in our shared stewardship of this vital system. The Great Lakes are a foundation of the Canada-US relationship, and how we manage water diversions and consumptive uses speaks directly to the strength of that partnership. The Great Lakes Compact and the parallel agreement among the provinces and states remain central to this work. Their leadership, cooperation, and vigilance has strengthened the region's ability to safeguard these waters, and the Commission is grateful for their continued commitment to science-based, responsible decision-making. The IJC exists to help our 2 countries address transboundary challenges in an objective, collaborative, and long-term manner. As pressures on water availability grow across North America, it is essential that decisions affecting the Great Lakes reflect sound science, transparent governance, and a clear commitment to the public interest on both sides of the border. Thank you to everyone who contributed to this report and who continues to engage with us. Your perspectives strengthen the Commission's work and support both countries in protecting these extraordinary waters for generations to come. And now I turn it over to my friend, Commissioner Chiblo.
Thank you, Commissioner Acker. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. The Great Lakes are living waters that sustain nations, communities, and ecosystems throughout the Great Lakes Basin. As we consider the final report on water diversions and uses, we must remember that these decisions shape the long-term health and balance of the waters themselves. For Indigenous nations, the Great Lakes hold a sacred place, and our responsibility to them have been carried out through generations. Protecting these waters calls for collaboration and honors Indigenous rights, knowledge systems, and governance. And I am encouraged by the growing recognition of the essential role of First Nations tribes and Métis peoples. And I believe collaboration with Indigenous peoples enhances the protection of the Great Lakes for today and into the future. I participated yesterday in the Second International Day for Water Justice, which was hosted by multiple organizations. And these were global dialogues about water, linking Indigenous peoples, knowledge holders, researchers, non-government organizations, and community peoples in the discussions about the importance of water. And I feel that the IJC leads these types of dialogues through events such as these and has an important role in supporting collaboration with Indigenous peoples, but also have an important role in respectful and cooperative management, ensuring that the cumulative impacts of diversions and uses are understood and addressed. I look forward to today's discussion and to continuing work in a good way. Now, miigwech.
Thank you very much, commissioners. So here is our agenda for the webinar. Michael Lada will begin with some context on the IJC and this PWGL work for those who may be less familiar with them. We'll then turn it over to Murray Clayman and Dave Dempsey to provide an overview of the findings and recommendations in the report. Finally, we'll reserve the last portion of the webinar to answer any questions you may have. Next slide, please. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll then run through each question or comment. If we are unable to answer all questions, we commit to following up with you by email after the presentation. You're also welcome to send us questions or comments at any time by email to pwgl@ijc.org. And I'll now pass it over to my colleague, Michael. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad everybody could make it. The turnout is impressive. A little bit of background about the International Joint Commission. We were established through the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909. It was designed to help Canada and the United States to prevent and resolve disputes over the waters we share. An interesting fact about the treaty itself is that it was the first treaty to mention the word pollution, which I find very interesting. So today, the commission is made up of 6 commissioners, supported by 3 offices. We have one in Windsor, who supports the Great Lakes Water Quality Act, our Ottawa office, and one in Washington, D.C. Much of our work is carried out through more than 20 basin boards and communities. And these groups include roughly about 250 experts who contribute really essential scientific, technical, and community knowledge to everything that we do. The IJC's responsibilities fall in really 2 main areas. First, we review and approve certain projects that may use, obstruct, or divert or affect boundary waters across the border. This includes setting conditions to ensure that these projects do not harm either country's interests with regards to water resource management. The second is we investigate issues referred to us by the governments. These are called references. These references allow the Commission to study specific complex water-related challenges and provide independent science-based recommendations. The decadal view of this report of the protection of the waters of the Great Lakes is an example of a reference given to the commissions from the parties. Now, moving on to the context of the actual PWGL, in the late 1980s, public concern began to rise over proposals to remove or export large quantities of Great Lakes water. That concern prompted both federal governments to take a closer look at how these waters were being used and what protections were needed. In 1999, an issue was referenced to the Commission, asking the Commission to examine consumptive uses, diversions, interbasin transfers, and the removal of transboundary waters, and to recommend possible paths forward. Early on, the first go-around, the IJC delivered its report in 2000 and concluded that we needed an ongoing oversight in order to be successful, because we realized that things will continue to change. It was recommended by the government to undertake additional reviews, first after 3 years, and then after that, about at every 10-year interval, hence the decadal review. The government's accepted that advice, and the reports we're discussing today represent the second of those decadal reports on consumptive use, diversions, and removal of water from the Great Lakes. Now, to support this work, as you met earlier, a draft consultant's report was released early of July last year. That was put out for a 1-month public comment period. That feedback then informed a revised version completed this past October, and the final IJC report was published this December, a few weeks ago actually, December 2025. Together, these steps form the foundation for the Commission's current assessment of the recommendations, which we'll be getting into shortly. So next slide, please. Now, in a parallel process to the federal government's work, the 8 U.S. Great Lakes states and provinces of Ontario and Quebec come together to develop coordinated protections against unsustainable diversions and removals. I'm sure you've all heard about a few of them. Their collaboration resulted in some really pivotal landmark agreements, such as, like, let's say, the 2005 Great Lakes St. Lawrence River Basin Sustainable Water Resource Agreement, and the 2008 Great Lakes St. Lawrence River Basin Water Resource Compact, which is actually a legally binding within the United States. Together, these frameworks created really this unified basin, a basin-wide approach towards water protection at many different scales. They prohibit most or increased diversions or interbasin transfers of the Great Lakes water outside the basin, require really strong management practices within the basin, and establish shared rules to ensure that water use remains sustainable and controlled in the long term. We move this to slide 7. Now we get to talk about what we heard from our 2025 investigation. This review was led by Murray Clement from Canada and Dave Dempsey from the United States. Their work examined what really has changed since our last reporting in 2015, and this included trends in diversions in water use, how governments have implemented the Commission's 2015 recommendations, and how effective the compacting agreement has been overall. To build a full picture, the consultants engaged widely this time around. They conducted interviews with about 40 key stakeholders and subject matter experts, reached out to various Indigenous organizations through formal letters, gathered public input during a 1-month comment period, and convened a by invitation only workshop to explore these issues in greater depth. I see several of you have participated in that. Now, several themes emerged consistently across these conversations. Many emphasize the importance of protecting the compact and the agreement in of itself, while also clarifying key definitions to support consistent decision making. Participants stressed that and acknowledged on various scales and levels that Indigenous nations are rights holders and must be recognized and represented as such. There was also a strong call to address the new and intensifying pressures on the waters of the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence River Basin, and to advise the public trust document as part of this work, which I think we'll get into a little later. Now, the whole purpose of this, again, is to strengthen the scientific and monitoring foundations of our water management, and suggestions that the issues dealing with groundwater was another reoccurring priority. And finally, many highlighted the need for stronger public-facing education engagement to build understanding for long-term support of what the compact and agreement was. It was made very clear that many people on the landscape were not aware exactly what the compact meant or stood for. So right now, I'm done. I'd like to pass this on to Murray Clayman and Dave Dempsey, who will actually be going into more detail about the 16 recommendations that are being put forward by the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'll take the first recommendation. I wanted to thank everybody who participated in the discussions that we had. Once again, the Great Lakes Basin is a very robust community that cares a lot about the resource and about policies related to that. And I think I can speak for Murray when I say that we're really heartened by the amount of interest in this project. We looked at the compact itself and the agreement, and not to anybody's surprise, there seems to be a strong preference for leaving those intact for two reasons. One is that obviously it'd be cumbersome to submit changes to 8 states to get the compact amended, and of course there need to be federal approval. But also, people said the compact is working well, pretty well. It's meeting its expectations and obligations. So the Commission recommends that the states and the provinces maintain the compact and agreement in their current form. But given this, the Great Lakes states and provinces need to maintain a high level of awareness, as water scarcity outside the basin and water demand within the basin has the potential to strain available water resources. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Dave. I just wanted to echo my support also for the amount of participation that we had from various stakeholders, the cooperation we had from commissioners and commission staff for this project. It certainly echoes what you said about the importance of the Great Lakes. A lot of people, of course, are very concerned about the water quality agreement and implementation of that, but it's equally important, I think, to recognize the withdrawals, diversions, and consumptive uses that are taking place, especially now. As Dave mentioned, and as the staff pointed out, we did a lot of consultation with various stakeholders, and one of the main themes that came through, obviously, was highlighted here in these 3 recommendations that have to do with Indigenous nations. Most people felt that they were not properly consulted for the agreement and compact. However, we did recognize that a lot of improvement has been made in terms of trying to touch base and ensure that their voices are heard. But we felt that more could be done. So we were calling on, and I think the Commission supported our recommendation, that the Great Lakes states and the provinces commit to what we said were greater collaboration with Indigenous nations, and see if they can determine how they could contribute more to the decision making than what they do now. It was also felt and recommended by us as well as by the commission that by the next IJC review, which would be in 10 years' time, that the Compact Council and the regional body consider ways to more clearly acknowledge the distinct status of First Nations tribes and Métis people, and also by the next review, the regional body should identify and pursue options for greater participation in their meetings, notwithstanding that they do now. We felt those efforts could be improved. Next slide, please. Over to you, Dave.
That's right. Thanks. I couldn't see the slide. One of the issues that came up in a number of our conversations with stakeholders was the matter of definitions in the compact. Several of these have aroused some disagreements and discussions during decision-making on individual proposals, especially obviously the Waukesha proposal, which was adopted, and also the Racine diversion, which was handled by the state of Wisconsin. The terms that seem to generate the most controversy or disagreement are what a reasonable water supply alternative is, what a largely residential supply is, and also in the future concern about what the humanitarian needs exemption might amount to. So rather than wait for the next controversy to come along, the commission's recommending that the Compact Council and regional body have an engagement process, public engagement process, to help define those terms for the satisfaction of everybody in concern before as I said, before the crisis had come. So we're hoping there'll be public engagement, discussion of the definitions, and some kind of adoption in the commission's procedures, and also with respect to the agreement. Next slide.
One of the things we heard quite a bit about was the perception that stakeholders in the basin are very familiar with the water quality agreement, but maybe not as familiar with the other agreement and the compact concerning water diversions and consumptive uses. They certainly become aware when there are specific proposals for diversions or for withdrawal. But we recommended, and the commission is also recommending, that an education plan, subject of course to resources, be developed to help Indigenous communities and other interested parties understand better what the compact is all about and what the agreement contains, and that these are important elements of protecting the waters of the Great Lakes. And so with this recommendation, there is a hope that there be a better appreciation and understanding of this compact and agreement, so that it continues, to be effective in terms of protecting the waters. Next slide. The other things we found out were a little more of a housekeeping nature, which the IJC agreed and formed part of their suite of recommendations. The first one there talks about the methodology for reporting consumptive use. There are certain elements that the states use to do this. However, we found that it was not uniform across all the jurisdictions, and the commission agreed and therefore made a recommendation that if possible, it would be helpful to establish a uniform methodology so that consumptive uses are reported on in a uniform way. The next issue that we picked up on, and the commission as well in their recommendation here, talks about groundwater use. There's a lot of activity going on in the various jurisdictions and federally in both countries, but the commission is recommending a specific groundwater plan that can be tracked and reported on in the next 10-year review. The agreement and the compact call for cumulative impact assessments every 5 years. There's also a trigger for initiating what they call an interim cumulative impact under certain conditions. What we felt and passed along to the commission, and they are recommending as well, is that the criteria for initiating these interim assessments be looked at to make sure that they reflect the best current understanding and availability to do these assessments in a proper way. And finally, the Great Lakes Commission is acknowledged as doing a very good job in terms of maintaining and reporting on all the data that is collected every year annually. We felt, and the Commission agreed with this in terms of their recommendation, to make sure that that Commission has the necessary resources to maintain that data quality, and especially these days in terms of security. So we hope that that recommendation would be implemented. Next slide, please.
We looked at discussed with the stakeholders the status of the water conservation and efficiency plans. Obviously, the Great Lakes states and provinces need to demonstrate their own stewardship is impeccable when it comes to water, including water conservation. We heard from a number of stakeholders that the plans that are submitted under the agreement and compact are not consistently driving new initiatives in all jurisdictions. And the Commission feels that signals a need to provide renewed attention and action to this priority. The Commission found there was a hopeful sign in that the Economic Transformation Action Plan released by the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative in September of last year includes a commitment to preventing an overall increase in consumptive uses, even as the initiative seeks to attract significant economic growth over the next decade. So the Commission's recommendation is that the Compact Council and regional body renew their focus on strengthening water conservation and efficiency across the basin by providing a clear guidance to ensure that state and provincial plans are both rigorous and actionable and drive new efforts. Next slide, please. One issue that we looked at and heard about from many stakeholders is the possibility of significant new pressures. In fact, some new pressures are already being observed. The Basin Water Resources Compact and Agreement, we hope, will remain strong enough to address such proposals. Some of the most significant emerging threats are artificial intelligence and data centers, which are both energy and water intensive. And the rapid expansion of the hyperscale data centers, driven by cloud computing and crypto mining, poses serious risks to water availability and ecosystem health. So the Commission is recommending that the various parties develop a set of best practices for sustainable water use to be employed by or applied to operators of large-scale data centers. And among these practices should be a consistent methodology of accounting for and reporting to governments and the public on the volumes of water withdrawn and consumed. One other issue that came up is the possibility of applying the public trust doctrine as a backstop for the compact. This was a recommendation in the Commission's 2015 report that has not been acted on. So the Commission basically encourages the states and provinces to have some kind of a public consultation about what role the public trust doctrine can play in protecting the Great Lakes from diversions in the future. Well, that's that. Next slide.
Over
Thank
to
you
you,
both very
Oliver.
much. Thank you. So I will now go over our next steps as a commission. So looking ahead, there are three main areas of work that will guide us following the release of the PWGL report. First, we'll carry out targeted outreach this year with provincial, state, and federal partners. This will be an opportunity to walk through the report's findings, address any technical questions, and identify where jurisdictions may be able to align on future work. The second major next step is to begin planning for implementation of Recommendation 16 from the consultant's report, which was addressed to the Commission and subsequently endorsed by commissioners. This recommendation calls on the IJC to monitor climate variability, new and increased water uses, population trends, and emerging science on an ongoing basis, essentially building a sustained information foundation for the next 10-year review. So our first subtask in that area will be to develop an implementation plan outlining the scope of work, identifying existing monitoring programs from which we can draw, and determining where the gaps are. Finally, the third main area is to take stock of lessons learned from this cycle. This includes what worked well, what was challenging, and what structural improvements we can make moving into the next 10-year review. A key part of this will be identifying ways to strengthen collaboration with Indigenous nations, starting earlier in the process, and offering better support for participation, and working together on approaches to the assessment itself. We'll also look internally at opportunities to refine timelines and improve project management so that the next cycle is even more effective. The overall goal is to make this a continuous learning process so that each review builds on the last. So with that, we'll now move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. I do not see questions or comments in the chat yet, but we encourage you to type in your questions. Again, we are available after the webinar at our email address, pwgl@ijc.org, and we'd be happy to engage with you by email as well.